Hello everyone, Genshin's 5.6 beta cycle has recently begun and Ifa will be the one new 4-star natlan character releasing in patch 5.6. When people initially look at his first kit, I think a lot of people were a bit disappointed by its design. But is Ifa actually an underwhelming character meta-wise, or is he not as bad as you might think? To answer this question, let's analyze the initial beta kit of natlan's third male character. As always, remember that this is very early information, so very subject to change. Oh, hold on, let me get that. Speaking of male natlan characters, today I have the privilege of showcasing some of the newest products from UGREEN, the sponsor of this video. They have officially partnered with Genshin Impact to release the UGREEN and Genshin Impact series charging utilities with exclusive limited edition Kinich themed designs. They have graciously sent me their special Kinich themed fast charging adventure kit to test out their 3 main Genshin inspired products, and I am extremely impressed with their quality in terms of both performance and style. First, they have the 20,000 mAh capacity power bank capable of charging your phones, tablets, or laptops with ease with its 100-watt single port output and 130-watt dual port output. And with its smart TFT display, you and the HOL can easily keep track of all the charging and power statuses. Second is the 65-watt Kinich charger. With 3 total outlets, you'll be able to efficiently charge 3 different devices simultaneously. And third, the 15-watt 2-in-1 wireless magnetic charger with Qi 2 certification. Great for easily charging your iPhone and AirPods for instance at the same time. Not only do all 3 allow for extremely fast charging, they are all compact and portable so you can easily take them with you while you travel for a quick access of power. And for me, as a Genshin fan, the coolest thing is that everything is made to be Kinich themed, making it unique from any charger or power banks you can get elsewhere. They're basically like Genshin merch but with actual practical use cases. If you want to get your own Kinich in a HOL themed charging utilities by UGREEN, check out the link in the description and comments to get up to 30% off, as well as the ability to enter UGREEN's massive giveaway. Again, thank you to UGREEN for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's get back into the main video. Ifa is a 4-star Animal Catalyst user with an Elemental Mastery Ascension. His primary role is to be an Animal on-fielder driving transformative reactions while also providing team heals. If this sounds very familiar, you'd be correct because this is the exact same role that Mizuki has, who was released not so long ago. The best way to summarize Ifa's kit is that he is Mizuki 2.0 but plays similarly to Wanderer. Ifa's main gameplay centers around his elemental skill. It makes him hover in the air and enters Night Soul Blessing with 80 Night Soul points while also enhancing his attacks just like Wanderer. In this enhanced state, Ifa can either spam normal attacks or hold his normal attack to start shooting with his gun. Currently, spamming normal attack will fire 11 hits while holding normal attack will fire 12 hits. The ICD is every other hit, so every other hit can trigger Swirl. These hits will deal damage and heal the party, and the healing scales off of Ifa's Elemental Mastery. At talent level 9, a 1000 EM Ifa will heal the team about 441 HP per hit. With a total of 12 hits from holding normal attack, Ifa will heal a total of about 5300 HP for the entire team every rotation, which honestly is kinda weak considering he's a veterinarian. In terms of his burst, Ifa simply fires a circular AoE that deals damage and groups enemies for a few seconds. If those enemies were affected by Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, then they will be marked and will take additional damage after a few seconds corresponding to the element they had originally. Aside from his elemental skill, Ifa's A1 passive is a key part of his kit as it buffs reaction damage. When Ifa is in Night Soul's Blessing, he will buff the reaction damage of both Swirl and Electro charged for all party members depending on the total amount of Night Soul points the team currently has. Each Night Soul point equates to 1 Rescue Essential point, and every 1 Rescue Essential point increases the reaction damage of Swirl and Electro charged by 1.2%. At C0, you can have a max of 150 Rescue Essential points, which means that the damage of Swirl and Electro charge can increase by a maximum of 180%. Ifa alone gets a maximum of 80 Night Soul points from his skill, so he needs another natlan teammate to help reach the max Swirl and Electro charge damage buff. But remember, Ifa constantly consumes Night Soul points while he's on field, so at C0 you won't be able to maintain the max damage bonus to Swirl and Electro charge, and it will constantly decrease the longer Ifa stays on field. Lastly, his A4 passive simply gives Ifa 80 EM for 10 seconds when Night Soul burst is triggered. So overall, his kit is pretty simple. After your support skills, Ifa presses his skill, then holds normal attack until he runs out of Night Soul points. You can use his burst either before he uses his skill or at the end. As a 4-star, Constellations can be very important, so let's go go over them. C1 gives Ifa extra energy when he attacks during his enhanced state from his skill, helping his ER requirements. C2 gives quadruple the amount of rescue essential points for every Nightsoul point the party has above 60, and it also increases the max rescue essential points you can have by 30. This basically means that if Ifa is paired with another natlan character, for example Auroron, he'll be able to maintain a maximum swirl and electrocharge damage increase of 216% for the majority of the time that he's on field. C3 increases his skill talent level by 3, C4 gives his burst 3 additional seconds of grouping, while also giving Ifa 100 EM for 15 seconds after using his burst. C5 increases his burst talent level by 3, and lastly with C6, when Ifa holds his normal tech to fire shots while in his enhanced state from his skill, each hit has a 50% chance to fire an additional shot that deals 120% of the original damage. Holding normal attack normally allows Ifa to shoot 12 shots, so on average C6 gives an additional 6 hits. Not only is this extra raw damage, but also extra team healing as well as extra swirls. In addition, C6 extends the duration of flight for overworld exploration. Overall, it does look like Ifa will greatly depend on his constellations for his performance, specifically C2 so he can properly maintain the buffs for swirl and electrocharge, and C6 for the additional damage, extra team healing, and extra swirls. Next, let's go over Ifa's potential build options. Ifa is yet another on-field animo driver catalyst that scales with the EM, so he's going to build very similarly to a unit like Mizuki. 5-star EM weapons such as Mizuki Signature or Nahida Signature look to be great choices. For 4-star weapons, Wandering Evenstar is always solid for the attack buff from its special passive, and Hakushin Ring looks like a great free-to-play option considering Ifa is typically going to play with an Electro character for Electrocharge. If you miss this event weapon, then the Sumeru Craftable Fruit of Fulfillment is a decent free-to-play option. Lastly, for those of you committed to playing Ifa as a typical crit DPS, any damage-oriented weapon will work, such as Lost Prayers, Wander's or Wriothesley's Signature, or the Widsith. For artifact sets, as an animo on-fielder that triggers swirls, 4-piece Viridescent Venerer is his most obvious best set for his intended role. Ifa is the first animo support from natlan, however, which means he can use 4-piece Scroll to uniquely give the full damage bonus to animo DPSs. But while this can work, it isn't that good for animo DPSs because it takes him a significant amount of time to go into Nightsoul's Blessing with skill, proc 4-piece Scroll, then plunge out of his hovering state to swap out. So support-wise, Ifa will likely stay on Viridescent Venerer. For main DPS Ifa enjoyers, you can use Obsidian Codex on him as a hyper carry. For artifact stats, Ifa will be built full EM for his primary role as an animo driver, just like Mizuki and Sucrose. For main DPS Ifa, it's the usual attack hourglass, animo damage goblet, crit circlet. Lastly, let's discuss Ifa's potential team comps. For those of you really committed to playing Ifa as a typical attack scaling animo DPS just like Xiao and Wanderer, you can play him with Farazan and then with Bennett and Niansan, or with the Electrocharge package with Yelana Shengqiu and Auroron. These teams aren't very good, but if you really want to play Ifa like this, the team does function. For support Ifa, you can theoretically play him with an animo DPS like Wanderer to provide 40% animo damage from 4-piece Scroll. However, the max damage bonus requires Ifa to be in Nightsoul's Blessing and trigger a reaction. To do this, Ifa has to use his skill to start hovering, trigger swirl, then he has to hold his skill so he plunges out of the air before he can swap out. This takes up a lot of time, so while Ifa as a 4-piece Scroll buffer for animo DPSs can work, it's not looking to be better than existing support options. Ifa's main teams will have him play a similar role to units like Sucrose and Mizuki, a full EM animo on-fielder that drives reactions, specifically Swirl and Electrocharge because he buffs their damage. Since his reaction buff scales off of the team's total Nightsoul points, Ifa will be paired with Auroron in all of these teams as he's from natlan and synergizes well with Electrocharged. Then you'll need an off-field Hydro character for Electrocharge such as Farina, Shengqiu, and Yelan. And for the last party slot, you can run a second Hydro unit picking any two from Farina, Yelan, and Shengqiu. You can also use a second off-field Electro character like Fischl, or in scenarios with a lot of enemies, you can use a second Animo character who has off-field capabilities like Venti or Kazuha. And that's everything on Ifa as of now. As of making this video, there isn't that much reliable TC on Ifa, as Escoffier, the 5-star releasing alongside Ifa, is much more interesting in terms of team building and is looking very meta relevant. From the very few calcs I have seen, C6 Ifa looks to be comparable to Sucrose as an Animo driver in Taser teams, and he's arguably better than Mizuki in this role damage wise. So with this perspective, Ifa is actually looking like a good unit in his role as an on-field Animo driver triggering transformative reactions, as he can match and potentially surpass the other Animo units performing the same role in terms of team DPS. However, this evaluation does have several caveats, as Ifa does have some glaring weaknesses. First, Ifa's performance is dependent on constellations like his C2 and C6. Without them, he's not going to be as good of an animo driver. Second, his teams are largely Squirrel and Electrocharge based, and while these teams perform very well in AoE scenarios, they will perform much worse in single target fights, which is common in endgame content like Spiral Abyss. Third, Ifa's team healing is actually pretty weak, which is surprising since he's supposed to be a veterinarian. As an animal healer, you would think that Furina would be by far the best Hydro teammate in his teams. However, Ifa's healing doesn't look to be good enough to proc Furina's overheal passive, resulting in overall low team fanfare and thus a lower damage bonus buff from Furina. And fourth, when Ifa presses his skill to hover in the air and fire his attacks, there is no mention that he gains any resistance to interruption in his kit. So he's looking to have the same issue as Wanderer without a shield, where he can easily get knocked by attacks while he's airborne, to the point where you probably want Xingqiu as his Hydro teammate for his resistance to interruption. Lastly, the main thing that makes me feel underwhelmed about Ifa's kit is that he doesn't bring anything special as a new animo unit. Is he a bad unit? Considering early calcs seem to indicate that he performs similarly to Sucrose and Taster teams as E6, no, Ifa isn't looking to be bad. In fact, he's looking to be a strong choice for these teams. But does Genshin really need another on-field animo driver? We have Sucrose, Sayu, and Mizuki, who was just released 2 patches ago, and both Heizo and Lan Yan can technically be played in this role as well. On top of that, many of these units are also Catalyst users, have EM scaling, and can also heal. So Ifa doesn't really bring anything special to the overall meta. It just feels like a missed opportunity since Ifa is the first animo support from natlan, so he could have leaned towards being a strong 4-piece scroll support for animo DPSs. But of course, this is just his initial beta kit, so anything can change in the upcoming weeks. I hope this initial overview and analysis on Ifa's kit was helpful to you all. I will continue to analyze any significant beta changes made to Ifa, so if you want to keep track of the beta changes, I highly recommend subbing to the channel to keep up to date with the latest beta news with TC influence analysis. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or like the video if you enjoyed. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.